The February 2026 Comic Club, covering the 2004 through 2005 Batman War Games event. For the purpose of time, I couldn't force people in our Discord to read the full War Games event, which is between 20 to 30 issues, depending where you consider the crossover that spanned all the Bat title books to begin and finish, and what you define as a Bat title. So we are specifically reading the issues I shall affectionately refer to today as the Robin Trauma Arc, while summarizing briefly the surrounding issues and connective tissue. The Robin arc is specifically hyper-focusing on Tim Drake, Jack Drake, and Stephanie Brown. Everything else, including War Games, is secondary to those character arcs. Content warnings/trigger warnings, school shootings, death, blood, gang warfare, torture, sexual assault, parental neglect, drug abuse, and teenage pregnancy. As a quick fire reminder for anybody struggling to remember who all Bruce Wayne, aka Batman's, proteges are, a quick rundown of the Robins and Batgirls at that point in time of 2004/2005. Robin 1 was Dick Grayson, who grew out of the role and became Nightwing, independent of Batman, protecting his own city of Bloodhaven, having recently let the death of Blockbuster happen in front of him. Nightwing is not dating the second Batgirl during this time. Robin 2 is dead, crowbarred and blown up in a shed full of explosives with his biological mother in Batman: A Death in the Family. Check out the YouTube upload of that comic club for additional details. Batgirl 2 was Barbara Gordon, who after being paralyzed by a gunshot wound now fights crime from a wheelchair as Oracle, a tech genius who coordinates the movements and research for the Bat Family, the Birds of Prey, and at times the Justice League. At this point in time, she might just be the most important person in DC's superhero community. Batgirl 3 is Cassandra Cain, the daughter of professional killers, not even taught how to speak as her dad saw it as a useless skill to teach the perfect killing machine that he was training. Seeing Batman with his no-killing morality, after a mission in Gotham, she defected from her father during the events of No Man's Land, her abilities being able to read the slightest body movements to predict combatants' fight moves before the combatants even know their next move, making her an invaluable asset in Batman's fight against Gotham's criminal element. Robin 3 is Tim Drake. Previously for Tim Drake, 1989's A Lonely Place to Die by Marv Wolfman, George Perez, and Jim Aparo collects Tim Drake's 5-issue journey to becoming the third Robin. In the Batman and New Titans comics, Tim deduces the true identities of Batman and Robin, seeing similarities in the acrobatic movesets of Dick Grayson the Acrobat and Nightwing the Superhero, making Tim the only Robin to have ever worked out Batman's secret identity. Tim takes up the Robin mantle, not from a desire to be Robin, but because in order for Batman to be their best, Batman needs a Robin to balance out Batman's darkest instincts. In 1990, the Detective Comics arc Rite of Passage saw a voodoo cult kidnap Tim's globe-trotting parents, Janet and Jack Drake. Batman takes down the cult, but Jack and Janet were poisoned before being rescued. Tim's mum, Janet, dies, while Jack Drake, his father, was left in a coma. Batman brought Jack back to Gotham, and Tim became Bruce's latest ward. Some months after their return, in the 1993 Robin series, Jack awoke from his coma, but the poisoning had left him unable to walk or stand. The loss of his wife, combined with the realization that his pre-coma lifestyle wasn't what was best at raising Tim, led Jack to desire to be more involved and closer with Tim. Tim's duties as the Boy Wonder meant that closeness with Tim has been tested as the number of secrets and lies between the two build up. It's worth noting that Tim, having a parent that was alive when he first became Robin, who was an active part of his life when not comatose, is a large cornerstone of what helped set Tim Drake apart from the other mostly orphaned Robins. Jack Drake is aware of Bruce being a part of Tim's life during Jack's coma and is confused why the mentorship has continued now that Jack is in the picture. You see the balance of Tim trying to be a vigilante while keeping the rest of his life together and feeling guilt at not telling his father. Jack Drake does genuinely try to be a good parent to Tim, though often misguided in how Jack goes about it. A mission gone awry seems Tim Drake disappear for a month, and the cover story, not painting Tim in the best light, gets Tim sent to boarding school so Jack knows where Tim is at all times. In time, Jack regained the use of his legs with the aid of physical therapist Dana Winters. Although Dana was more than 10 years younger than Jack, attraction grows between Jack and Dana, and they begin dating. Dana's involvement in the Drake's lives was a blessing, as she was able to curb Jack's anger at his son being so distant and helped him feel more connected to his father. In time, Jack and Dana married. Soon afterward, Jack's company went bankrupt and the Drakes lost their mansion home, and Tim had to be pulled out of boarding school. The loss of Jack's profession caused Jack to reflect on his life, slipping into a depressive period as unresolved trauma and grief surrounding his late wife Janet surfaced. Jack eventually did recover, though. Tim Drake is unique from other Robins as the most proficient detective, a great computer specialist. He's selfless, and Tim's the nerdiest Robin who's into computer games, D&D, and skating. Tim's intellect is most accurately expressed as being an efficient strategist, good at forward planning. To Nightwing, Tim is a non-biological brother, and while Batman doesn't pick favorite Robins, some of Batman's actions, including one in today's comic club book, speak pretty loudly that Tim is a contender for the title of favorite Robin in Batman's book. Previously for Stephanie Brown. Then there is Stephanie Brown, first appearing in Detective Comics in 1992. Having gone by the codename The Spoiler, donning the mask to spoil the crimes of her supervillain father, Arthur Brown, the Clue Master, a third-rate Riddler knockoff, and place him behind bars to protect her mum and herself. Tonight will be the story of how Stephanie Brown was very briefly Robin. In 2005, when these issues are set, Stephanie has never been Batgirl, Jason is still dead, and other Robins after her and Tim do not exist yet in the main DC timeline. When the ongoing Robin series was launched, the writer decided to use Spoiler as a foil and eventual love interest for Tim Drake. For a large part of the series, even while the two characters dated, Robin deduced and used Spoiler's secret identity, but Spoiler did not know Robin's because once you know one identity in the Bat family, it gets pretty easy to start working out who the rest are. Robin initially found Spoiler an annoyance, but over time, they would sometimes work as crime-fighting partners, and as feelings develop, Tim breaks up with the civilian girl that he's been dating to start dating Stephanie instead, though the two have quite the on- and off-again relationship, though not dissimilar to 20th century Barbara Gordon and Nightwing in dynamic. Stephanie's mother, Crystal Brown, is a trained nurse who struggled with pain pill addiction she was more likely to relapse to when Arthur Brown was around in her life. Crystal has struggled Steph's entire life to set boundaries with Cluemaster, his name even on her mortgage, so Crystal can't toss him on the streets between his stints in jail. Once, when Stephanie was young, Crystal had to be taken to rehab by Arthur leaving one of his friends to babysit who attempted to sexually assault the young girl. She managed to fight her attacker off and escape, but when she returned home later and told her father, Arthur accused her of lying and told her to never mention it again. When Stephanie later took up the mantle of the Spoiler, one of her first missions was to take Arthur's friend down, only to learn he'd died from an overdose 8 days after she told her father what had happened. While Cluemaster and Stephanie Brown were consistently drawn, Crystal being a tertiary level character at best with no character design template, so with a cavalcade of artists on the Bat books would often show up with varying appearances of different hair colors, styles, and body type. A combination of Crystal's addiction and pressing work schedule meant Crystal was frequently an absentee mother for Steph, but there are times where you can see Crystal really try to be there for Steph. Between her terrible father and underwhelming mother, Stephanie craved acceptance from other adult figures in her life, willing to be recklessly dangerous if it meant she could prove herself. In 1998, Stephanie Brown was the center of a teen pregnancy storyline. The father, a sleazy older guy called Dean, who she was seeing for a little while off panel, who left Gotham during the events of Batman Cataclysm, when Gotham was rocked by an earthquake. This Stephanie story arc garnered a lot of positive press at the time, but while it's maybe a story worth exploring, this was the main example of Chuck Dixon, who normally kept his writing in the various Bat books of the 90s and 2000s, centrist ideologically, showcasing Dixon's real political ideologies. Dixon is a hard, right-wing conservative that was a Comicsgate sympathizer for many years and ended up putting a lot of disgusting anti-abortion verbiage in Tim Drake's mouth, and abortion was never even mentioned or considered an option in that story arc. Instead, she gives birth and puts the baby up for a closed adoption. The baby was never and has never been seen again. Robin was a more supportive birthing partner than the birth father was. There's a proud Bat family tradition of being masters of disguise, using a mix of acting skills and a mix of wigs, makeup, and face putty to transform themselves into other aliases to go undercover. Alfred and Batman did it quite a bit, the most famous example being Batman having an alias since 1972 called Matches Malone, a low to mid-level gangster Bruce would pretend to be in order to gain street-level intel about the criminal underworld, which Batman could then use in his fight against crime. Bruce's Matches persona would include a different hairstyle, a fake mustache, glasses, a New Jersey accent, a pair of shades, and a signature match that he'd suck on. Robin, taking after Batman, and Stephanie, not knowing Robin's real identity, would take off the mask, slick back his hair, don a pair of shades, and apply fake stubble, and go by the alter ego Alvin Draper to take Steph to her Lamar's classes without raising suspicion with her mum or the parenting group. Tim would also use the Alvin Draper alter ego to go undercover and enroll in an evil ninja training camp committing amateur crimes. Not relevant to this story, but just a fun detail. When Dean eventually did return to Stephanie's mother's neighborhood, it's clear he's heard the rumors about Steph's pregnancy, suspected it was his, but never bothered to follow up with her till a chance run-in, then hearing she gave the kid up for adoption, figures there's nothing standing between them hooking up again, an offer which Stephanie rightly responds to with a swift kick to Dean's reproductive organs, followed by 2 knockout punches, the second after Crystal warns Steph that Dean is getting back up from the first punch. As Crystal was putting away Steph's maternity clothes post-birth, she discovered Steph's spoiler outfit. After initially freaking that Steph was becoming a supervillain like her father Arthur, Steph explained she was responsible for taking Cluemaster down multiple times. While Crystal enjoyed that irony, she forbade Steph from getting into costume again, a edict that Stephanie would ignore. A historical recap of where we are up to in the Robin comics. At this point in time, Stephanie has learnt Tim's identity, told by Batman when inquiring of Tim's whereabouts after Robin disappeared from Gotham for several days on a secret Tibetan mission with no means of communication. Tim was furious with Batman because Batman's secret identity was his to disclose, not Batman's. If this can't be interpreted as a queer allegory for being outed by a loved one to another person when you aren't ready, I don't know what is. Spoiler began getting some sporadic training from the Birds of Prey's Oracle and Black Canary, as well as some lessons from Batman, though Batman quickly decides she is not crime fighter material, telling her to hang up her costume and get the Birds of Prey to cut ties. Steph doesn't listen and continues heading out to fight crime secretly to prove herself to her mother, to the Birds of Prey, and to Batman. Stephanie and Crystal also learn that the Clue Master apparently died in the 2001 Suicide Squad series, though we learn after the events of War Games that reports of Clue Master's demise were, in fact, inaccurate. The writer for the Robin comics we're covering tonight is Bill Willingham. Bill Willingham has allegedly been an openly conservative pro-Israeli comic writer and artist, very active on social media and various websites over time. As we've previously discussed in Comic Club chats, he's also the creator of Fables, the beloved series and controversial metaphor about fairy tale characters brought into the real world. He worked on the ongoing Robin series from 2004 through 2006, doing approximately 27 issues, his run starting with issue 121 and concluding with issue 147. In Robin issue 121, we're given a mini reset to the Robin comic status quo with 16-year-old Tim Drake starting his first day at a new school called Lewis E. Grieve Memorial High School as a junior. Tim's status stating Stephanie Brown is carried over from earlier comics, quickly becoming a source of guilt for Tim when he experiences instant teenage hormonal attraction towards Darla Acquista, she/her, a fellow student whose father, Dr. Henry Acquista, he/him, is a crime lord with strong ties to Gotham organized crime. Make a mental note of the Acquistas. They're pivotal to a lot of tonight's story. There's one other student of name-worthy note introduced in these issues, Bernard Dowd. This version is cocky and full of himself, considers himself a personable everyman who can flit between all the social cliques in school, is a conspiracy theorist who reckons Batman is a government stooge, who uses orphanages he owns as recruitment grounds for the kids who become Robin, and Bernard will purport very loudly to having a massive crush on Tim's stepmother, Dana Winters, to Tim's face. Willingham has been very clear that his original conception for Bernard was a pretty surface-level girl-loving guy, but because DC does work for hire, creators don't own the comics or characters they create in most cases, and so a character can be rebooted a decade and a half later with a revised and frankly better personality and be openly gay. People can read that same scene now with a queer lens and read the same scene of Bernard loudly saying Tim's stepmother is hot as a gay kid who's overcompensating and doing what he thinks society expects of straight guys, still early in his journey to working out that he's gay. A newer comic can redefine an older work and add new layers where there were previously none, which can be one of the great things about comics sometimes. Some of Dr. Henry Acquista's gunmen moonlight for themselves, holding up a Star Labs armored car. 7 are apprehended by Batman and Robin at the crime scene, but an 8th gunman gets away with a classified military object. Mr. Acquista, learning about these unsanctioned crimes, sends an enforcer called Johnny Warren to collect his cut and reinforce who the boss is, and decides the jobs for those gunmen. Johnny kills the 8th gunman, and the military object bonds to Johnny, embedding like a giant cylindrical demonic talking spike through his chest. Robin, figuring out the identity of the 8th gunman, arrives at the gunman's apartment, Johnny having just killed the gunman inside. Johnny and Robin fight, giving Tim a black eye, and Johnny narrowly escaping after shooting the dead gunman's girlfriend. who Johnny had been harassing. The black eye horrifies Jack and Dana when Tim comes home, and he justifies the injury by saying he tried out for football after school. The weird military spike demands energy, and Johnny sucks the life force out of his own mother, leaving a withered husk behind to sustain the spike. Johnny repeats this on a handful of police officers and some of Henry's goons. You can see an example in the top left of this slide, and believe me, be grateful I chose one of the less gnarly panels. There was another panel in the same issue where it's showing eyeballs out of sockets and flesh peeling off finger bones as Johnny doing that life suck. Johnny, imbued with various abilities, and Robin, aided by Stephanie in costume as the spoiler, fight again. The artifact burning through the energy Johnny consumed from the others, then feeding off Johnny. Johnny refuses to stop fighting. When Johnny, running on fumes while looking like a levitating, nearly headless corpse, threatens to take a badly injured Stephanie's life force, Robin hits Johnny multiple times, seemingly killing Johnny in the process. In reality, Johnny's demonic spike put Johnny in a dormant state, as it was the only way to stop him from burning through their shared energy so fast. Once sufficiently recovered, Johnny walks off the morgue table and, laying low, resurfaces in Istanbul weeks later. Tim Drake, in the meantime, is left with the guilt of believing he has killed a man, even if Batman and Alfred aren't so certain. Batman tasks himself and Alfred to be drill sergeants, pushing Tim's training as hard as possible in the coming days. So Tim goes home, too tired to think and entertain the guilty thoughts that could plague Tim and destroy Tim's mind. 1993's Robin, issue 124, Good Parenting. At Tim's parent-teacher conferences, Jack and Dana learned Tim never tried out for football, the excuse Tim gave for the massive black eye Tim got from his fight against Johnny, though he fared better than Steph, who came away with a broken leg. 3 months after Tim has blamed himself for Johnny Warren's apparent death, Tim is unsure if he should continue as Robin. His heart no longer in it, Robin is doing worse in training, and Batman has grown tired of Tim using the excuses of being a murderer. Tim believes Bruce has lost trust in him, refusing to let Tim be Robin outside of the cave, but Bruce says he lost trust because Tim lost trust in himself first, so Bruce removes the weight of responsibility that Tim can no longer apparently carry. Alfred talks about when Tim first became Robin. Tim was full of a bright energy ready to tackle the world, seemingly capable of banishing the dark shadows of the Batcave after the death of the second Robin, Jason Todd. Instead, the opposite of what Alfred hoped happened. The Batcave has swaddled Tim in darkness. The mantle of Robin has beaten Tim down, becoming a burden. The murder of Johnny Warren, the final straw, breaking Tim Drake's spirit. Bruce will only let Tim use the excuse of seemingly killing Johnny Warren one more time, and that will be when Tim Drake quits being Robin. Batman gives Robin 48 hours to decide whether Tim wants to continue being Robin. Tim visits Stephanie, who has a broken leg from the Johnny battle, Stephanie persuading Tim that continuing as Robin is the right thing to do. In Istanbul, Johnny Warlock hires the assassin Scarab to kill Robin. This is Scarab's first appearance, and they'll be a recurring antagonist for Robin and Red Robin until the DC Universe reboot in 2011. They were reintroduced in the post-DC Rebirth world in 2021's Robins series by Tim Seeley, featuring all 5 of the main current and former Robins. Jack and Dana return to their house, where Jack rips apart Tim Drake's room to discover why he has been lying to them. Dana insists Tim is sweet and innocent and blames Stephanie for being a bad influence. Jack discovers the false panel in the back of Tim's closet where he finds the Robin costume and Tim's war journals, giving Jack more than enough context. Imagine you're Jack Drake. The incident that killed your wife left you comatose for months. You wake up to find some billionaire has befriended and looked after your son, which after being initially relieved, as strange as that dynamic is, you start to resent that person because your son seems to view this man to be as much a father figure as Jack. In fact, your child seems to prefer spending time with him. Jack claws his way through post-coma recovery to be the man and father that his son needs. Yet still, his son displays weird behavior, comes home with weird bruises, and so forth, only to learn that this billionaire playboy man has corrupted and indoctrinated his kid to seek out danger, going into scenarios every night that could get your son killed, all while wearing bright colors that make your kid the bigger target. This man was responsible for Tim disappearing from his safe new home in Keystone City and going into Gotham during No Man's Land, when the city, after being struck by a disease outbreak called Contagion and an earthquake called Cataclysm, had most of the civilian population evacuated and was closed off from the rest of the United States. The city deemed uninhabitable as supervillains waged turf wars for scraps of a decimated city, which Jack then had to use a serious amount of resources and capital to get a rescue effort mounted to extract his son to safety. Jack Drake doesn't even know that Tim's childhood innocence has been ripped away, Tim believing he has murdered a fellow human. This man, Bruce Wayne, or Batman, has a legacy and a bank account that would make him untouchable. You've seen evidence of your son getting hurt because of this man's mania, drawing your child into the crosshairs of danger. Would you not be sad and scared that your child has experienced a cult initiate level of brainwashing in order to believe this kind of bizarre, deadly lifestyle is natural? This man has convinced his son to lie to him repeatedly and so casually it's second nature. Would that not make you justifiably angry? Jack, fueled by his anger, barges into Wayne Manor, not able to contain his fury towards Alfred, and upon heated demands that Master Wayne return at once to the manor, Jack confronts Bruce Wayne, demanding Bruce release his hold over Tim, returning his son to Jack Drake. Jack Drake knows that he probably doesn't stand a chance against the billionaire titan of industry who runs the city, who is also an urban legend that has been at the center of thwarting people with crazy levels of power for decades, and probably has the police in his pocket. But Jack Drake is desperate. Jack Drake is a parent who would do anything for his child. He wants his son back without any further harm to his child, and with this man's influence over his child ended. And so Jack Drake draws and holds a gun to the head of the monster that is Bruce Wayne, the monster that is Batman, and commands him to give his son, Tim Drake, back. Jack Drake is possibly the only non-police person to have ever held a gun against Bruce Wayne, also known as Batman, and been completely, morally justified in doing so. Audience thoughts on Robin issue 124. Laughing Seal's thoughts. Everyone but Tim is such a piece of work in this issue. Ammo Glitter's thoughts. Ammo didn't have much to say about this issue. They kind of felt like it was largely table setting for a big confrontation between Tim and his dad in the next issue. Bruce is such an a-hole to Tim during the practice fight. Ammo thought it was hypocritical for him to come down so hard on Tim for feeling guilty and depressed, when Batman himself has a reputation for being one of the moodiest, saddest, most guilt-ridden characters in DC Comics. Also, who the hell writes a parenting advice pamphlet that says you should search your kid's room and invade their privacy? Joshy's thoughts. Obviously, I come at this from a different perspective than that of the other Comic Club participants. Tim Drake's time as Robin is baked into my childhood. I've read every one of the 123 issues before this issue and the preceding Robin miniseries at least once, most multiple times over the years. For me, Jack Drake learning about Tim's alter ego is a payoff, an emotional Chekhov's gun that has sat loaded ever since Jack Drake woke from his coma. Alas, I can't make you all read every single issue with Tim and Jack that precedes this one. They'll give me enough years of Comic Club, and I'll darn well give it a red hot go. Additionally, while the art by Francisco Rodriguez de la Fuente is exaggerated in its mannerisms, I'll point to the panels where Jack Drake learns Tim never tried out for the football team. The art functions the way comic art is always meant to. It tells the story and conveys the character's emotions clearly, even without dialogue boxes. There's lots of little details I love in this art, like Jack Drake visibly shaking with a mix of thinly restrained anger and nerves, or the positioning of the camera inside the panels, far out from Jack when he discovers the secrets inside the secret panel in the back of the closet to show the sense of helplessness and despair Jack feels for his son, or the low angle to make Wayne Manor look all the more ominous in the drive up to the confrontation. I was shocked to learn this was one of only 4 issues that De La Fuente has ever done for DC, and they've only co-penciled a single other comic issue outside of that work more than a decade later. 1993's Robin, issue 125, In the Shadow of Two Fathers. Bruce Wayne easily disarms Jack Drake. Jack insists that Bruce has some kind of hold over Tim, but that won't last after Bruce kills him to keep his secret. Bruce reassures Jack nobody is getting murdered tonight. Jack is free to go to the media after Bruce is done explaining. Robin returns to the Batcave rejuvenated from his chat with Stephanie and ready to return to being Robin with renewed vigor, only for his world to come crashing down upon seeing his father stood in the Batcave. Jack tells him to change out of his Robin playsuit into real clothes because they're going home now. Tim refuses to go, however, and explains that he is proud of the work he is doing. Tim compares what he's doing to what his grandfather did when he served in World War II at the age of 15. In Istanbul, the Scarab is researching Robin before she leaves for Gotham. She tells Johnny Warlock that no one has seen Robin for 3 months. Henry Acquista takes his daughter Darla out for her birthday, where she presses him about his job and how everyone at school is afraid of her because of him. She thinks Tim hasn't asked her out because of her father. Their conversation is interrupted by a phone call from Johnny Warlock, who orders him to start a gang war that will bring Robin out of hiding. Nightwing, summoned through the Butler Gossip channel, joins Batman and Alfred in the Batcave. Nightwing is worried that too many people know their identities, and Batman reassures him that he has plans in case they are ever exposed. Tim and Jack finish talking and announce their deal. Jack won't expose their identities, but Tim has to quit as Robin. Community thoughts on Robin 1993, issue 125. Joshy's thoughts. I think that while the art in the previous issue by the same team worked, some of the art in this issue pales by comparison, feeling outlandish and unsettling at times. That's not to say that there isn't some good panels, like during the convo between Alfred, Batman, and Nightwing. I really like the narrative choice for Robin after an existential crisis, choosing he wants to fight for being Robin again, only to have that decision torn away from him by events out of his control. Hamo glitters thoughts. Hamo was surprised that Batman truly terrible mentoring of Tim actually worked. There were a few funny moments that Hamo enjoyed, such as the scene of Robin coming into the Batcave and babbling on and on till someone told him his dad was there, and also Alfred offering to poison Jack Drake's dinner as a joke. But this issue was sorely lacking in superhero action to break up the extended scenes of Tim's family drama. Cutaways to Istanbul, to Stephanie's house, and to Darla's birthday are only mildly effective. Josh's counter there is just that those cutaways all mean more for those that have read the series before and will read the issues after the issues that we're covering tonight. Quick recap of 1993's Robin, issues 126 to 128. Tim Drake is adjusting to normal school, finding settling into being a civilian surprisingly easy. Darla surprise kisses him at school, but turns her down. Not because of the school rumor that her dad's a mob boss, but because Tim is in a committed relationship with Stephanie, though Darla struggles to believe he's telling the truth about his girlfriend who has never been seen. Not feeling dissimilar, probably, to Darla than the I've got a girlfriend in Canada excuse. Stephanie Brown becomes Robin to feel closer to Tim and gain Batman's approval. Batman's reasoning is that while Stephanie lacks the skills and talent currently, because perhaps they could be taught given her determination and stubbornness. Alfred isn't convinced this isn't a scheme to lure Tim back. Scarab pulls together a list of male teens that could be Robin and kills their way through a list of teens that physically resemble Tim across Gotham. Batman and Scarab fight to a standstill, and Batman agrees to let Scarab leave Gotham unimpeded in exchange for not killing Stephanie in her Robin costume, who disobeyed a direct order to not get involved from Batman, instead trying to assist before being promptly captured. Batman promptly fires Stephanie for being Robin and tells her not to bother suiting up as Spoiler either. Stephanie Brown does get one win during her brief stint as Robin, though it happens in the pages of Batgirl, where she and Cass Kane team up and stop Penguin from letting his henchmen with kids use the kids as gun mules. Looking at the page I've screenshot on the right of this slide, where highlighted is one of the main differences between being somebody wearing the Bat mantle is different to wearing the Robin mantle. The Robin outfit is bright and cheery. It doesn't scare innocent civilians and can be reassuring to children. So Steph, with the Robin costume and her words, is able to diffuse a tense situation in a way that Cass, as Batgirl in a Batgirl costume, can't. This was the only real win that Stephanie was allowed as Robin until the 80th anniversary of Robin saw the publishing of a one-shot flashback featuring a new story with Stephanie as Robin, where she's instrumental in taking down Firefly at an amusement park, though Batman is still not happy with her, comparing her to Tim, who would have waited outside and listened to Batman. In the first 4 parts of War Games Act 1, a meeting was set up with all of Gotham's major crime families cautiously turning up, bringing hired guns, some of the most dangerous mercenaries and assassins in the world, including the Penguin, protected by a hired Deadshot. A lot of the other names you'd recognize aren't in attendance, as Two-Face is in jail, and the likes of the Riddler, Poison Ivy, and Joker are MIA. The meeting is being watched by Spoiler, who on the outs from Batman is there on her lonesome, nobody knowing she's there until Catwoman, following some of the goons, also stumbles upon the meeting. Batman is occupied across town involving a different crime involving radioactive isotopes, so isn't aware of the meetup until afterwards. The powder keg meetup explodes when a suspicious hand inside a blazer causes a gunfight to break out amongst the gangsters. Only 8 of the 21 crime lords in attendance at this meeting survive. Of those crime lords, 1 is a mole for Batman, allowed to operate because he's less bad than the other crime lords. Stephanie watches from afar, feeling helpless to do anything, burning a note she has with all of the gangs in attendance recorded on it. This creates a lot of power vacuums and starts a lot of vendettas between the crime contingent of Gotham, lighting up old grudges, and small gangs aspire to move up in the crime world, putting civilians left and right in the crosshairs of a full gang war across the city, stretching Batman and his team of Cassandra Cain Batgirl, Barbara Gordon Oracle, and Catwoman very thin. Nightwing gets brought in to assist, though for a mix of time and a long, complicated story, you'll be shocked to learn we're largely going to skirt around Nightwing's arc of the story despite the character's popularity. Basically, he comes in after having let Blockbuster, a supervillain in Nightwing's home city who wore him down, be killed in front of him by supervillainess Tarantula, who then straddled and sexually assaulted a numb from shock and out of it Nightwing. Nightwing spends this arc in a downward mental spiral while Tarantula is looking to reform and fighting alongside Nightwing. For those who are part of our Nightwing Leaping into the Light comic club, yes, it's the same Blockbuster, 2 universe reboots events later, he's brought back to life, starting with that arc. I'd say this is the biggest low point for Nightwing as a character, but unfortunately, there's a whole memory loss from a Bullet Rick Grayson era that exists, which is somehow worse. We're also going to skip over the Catwoman tie-in issues, bar a couple specific interactions, just to streamline tonight's comic club a bit. Penguin is profiting off the gang war, selling arms that stoke the battles as fast as he can bring them to be offloaded into the city, hiring a number of villains, including the Trickster, Firefly, Robin enemy Lynx, and Nightwing villain Electrocutioner, among others. Dr. Leslie Tompkins, a Denny O'Neil creation that's been in various Bat books since 1976, is a non-powered civilian who runs a medical clinic that treats everybody from the Bat family to civilians to wounded gangsters, operating as a neutral space among all the fighting of war games. She was a close friend of Bruce Wayne's parents, who assisted Alfred at times through Bruce's childhood, and knowingly disapproves of Bruce being Batman, considering it a failing of her pacifist teachings. A de-aged version of the character was present in the Fox TV series Gotham, played by Morena Baccarin of Firefly and Sheriff County fame. 1993's Robin, issue 129, War Games Act 1, Part 5 of 8, Last Stand at Alamo High, with Giuseppe Camuncoli as penciler, Lorenzo Ruggiero as inker, and Guy Major as colorist. Firstly, there is a reporter with a name that pops up throughout these stories. He's not very important. He's just a Gotham citizen who made 17 appearances in various Bat books across the years of 2004 to 2005, then is never seen again and promptly forgotten. His existence is purely to make the world feel slightly bigger without using a known DC Comics journalist character who would detract attention from the main story like Vicky Vale. The gang war escalates quickly in Gotham City, and many schools have been forced to close except for Tim's high school. Darla Acquista is being taken to that school by her drivers/bodyguards to take a math test. The limousine they're traveling in is being followed by a heavy-duty car, which belongs to the Odessa mob. When turning the corner to get to the school, the Odessa mob's vehicle crashes into them, and armed thugs attempt kidnapping Darla while her bodyguards start a shootout against the thugs. The bodyguards are quickly killed, whom Darla has known for much of her life, and Tim Drake, who's been instructed by his father to only attend home and school, no crime fighting, is among a group of students next to the car crash. When Tim realizes that Darla is being taken by the Odessa mob, he decides that he can't be a normal civilian anymore, dashing forward and taking out as many thugs as he can. With the Odessa mob down, Tim instructs one student to call the emergency number for police and multiple ambulances, nobody else to call to avoid gridlocking the emergency system. Tim tells a couple of students called Jimmy and Tyrone to take Darla to the school and stay inside, but seconds later, more gunfire from the other end of the street sprays bullets at the students, hitting Jimmy in the leg. Tim realizes that this time the Ventriloquist and Scarface's gang are after Darla. Arnold Wesker, the first Batman villain to ever go by the codename Ventriloquist, has existed since 1988, and while he has some conflicting origin stories, summarized a traumatic, violent incident causes Wesker to develop dissociative identity disorder and channels all his violent, angry, criminal tendencies through his mob-themed ventriloquist dummy called Scarface. The Scarface persona dominates the human ventriloquist, commanding and abusing him. And before you ask, why doesn't Batman just tear the puppet apart? It's been tried, but ventriloquist just comes up with alternate puppets that are even worse. You don't want to know about Socko the sock puppet. Knowing they're probably there for Darla, Tim prompts Tyrone to get Darla into the school. Tim tries making himself a target to disarm them, failing as they spot Darla. Scarface's gang drive toward the school, stopping just long enough to instruct another student to apply pressure to Jimmy's short leg, then hijacks a car, which he rams into Scarface's car, diving out the driver window at the last second before impact. The timeline of how long that all takes is a little wonky if you think too hard about it, but hopefully the adrenaline of the story momentum carries you past that. Tyrone and Darla get inside the school, shocked by Tim's sudden skill set. While Tim pulls the Scarface puppet out of the car he hit, smashing it against the ventriloquist's head. Tim threatens the puppet's life to force the gang to come out of the car, unarmed and obeying everything he tells them. Meanwhile, Henry Acquista discusses the future of the five families when they are notified about the many attacks on their relatives, and Henry also learns that his daughter Darla has been targeted and is in danger. Henry Acquista won't stay put, and he demands action against his enemies. At the high school, Tim learns from Ventriloquist that every gang wants leverage over Henry Acquista by taking Darla before anyone else can. Tim throws the Scarface puppet at a couple of Gotham City Police Department cars that arrive. Before the police can engage, another car of Odessa mob thugs arrive and shoot down, instantly killing most of the police officers. Only one officer is left desperately calling for backup. Tim realizes that the situation is far too dangerous for him to tackle alone as a civilian with no weapons or bulletproof armoring that you normally would have as Robin, and he opts to get inside the high school. as the best course of action. Tim finds Darla and Tyrone in one of the school buildings while a perimeter of fire department and police forces cordon off an external perimeter to keep anxious parents and the media at bay and prevent more external attacks, although some mob members are already inside the building searching for Darla, who is scared. Darla tells Tim she is not going to be separated from him until the situation is over. A rogue gunshot sees Darla shot from behind through the right shoulder, causing her to faint and start losing copious amounts of blood. In a full-page spread, Tim attempts CPR on Darla while this paraphrased internal monologue plays through his head while also counting out medical steps. My name is Tim Drake, and I have one job in the world. My only job is to breathe twice into Darla Aquista's mouth for every 15 times I compress her chest. Back and forth, over and over. 15 chest compressions followed by 2 breaths, followed by another 15 chest compressions. Never stopping, no matter how tired I get, because you don't give up until relieved by qualified medical help. That's the rule, and I know that qualified medical help isn't coming. Not anytime soon. Maybe not at all. It's worth noting, while this issue took place in 2004, 5 years after the Columbine massacre, since 1999, the US has had somewhere between 400 to 600 school shootings. So school shootings have remained as relevant today as they were in 1999 and 2004, perhaps even more so, given the average annual number has spiked since 2019, not including COVID lockdown years. General community thoughts on Robin's 1993 run, issue 129. Josh's thoughts. As heinous as the concept being explored is, the way the story is told, both from a narrative and a Tim Drake character perspective, I love. We get to see that for Tim Drake, even if he doesn't realize it, Robin is just a costume. The opposite for Batman, for whom Bruce Wayne is the costume. End of the day, Tim Drake is the hero through and through. Tim is obviously experiencing emotions throughout this issue, but they all get placed on the back burner for crisis management, from taking out mobsters to CPR to making sure the authorities are called without overwhelming the phone lines. Laughing Seal's thoughts. Tim, my boy, she was shot and lost blood. I really don't think that is what you should be doing to treat it. Otherwise, improvement over the first 2 issues, but still not really gluing Laughing Seal to the pages. It felt like there was way too little investment into Darla. In fact, the prior issue made her seem a little airheaded, so the whole issue revolving around her felt like a strange choice. Maybe it would have landed better for Laughing Seal had he read the whole series and gotten to know her character. Amoglitter's thoughts. The trope of gang wars was an overused, heavily sensationalized cliche in the 90s. This story, written in the 2000s, doesn't fare much better. It instead seems to lean into the trope just as hard. Amo did feel bad when Darla got shot, though. And Josh's only counter there is that gang wars are a staple of Batman comics. The 2000 Batgirl run, issue 55, War Games Act 1, part 6 of 8, Total War, with Kinsun as penciler, Aaron Soud, Rodney Ramos, and Adam DeCracker as inkers, and Tony Avina as colorist. Barbara Gordon, Oracle, is overworked, not having slept in 30 hours, and treated like a secretary messenger service by Batman, snaps at Cassandra Cain Batgirl when Cass asks where Stephanie Brown is. Batgirl runs into Stephanie on the streets, back in the spoiler costume again. Batgirl tells Spoiler to go home. She isn't well trained enough to operate safely on streets this volatile. Batgirl asks if Spoiler is lying when Steph agreed that she should head home. Spoiler leaves without responding. Receiving reports of the mob hit at Tim Drake's high school, Oracle phones Batman. Batman immediately drops the enemies he's fighting and goes straight to the school, pulling multiple field assets, Batgirl and Nightwing included. I mentioned this in detail when we covered the 2022 Tim Drake Robin series for Comic Club, that Batman is at his best when being allowed to show that he cares for his Bat family. In this case, you can see how deeply he cares for Tim, even though he's no longer part of the costumed family. Batman wouldn't compromise his operation for just any member of the Bat fam, but he'll do so for Tim Drake. Of course, we immediately pivot from Batman being the best to Batman being the worst. Batman gives orders to Batgirl and Nightwing through Batcoms to move to specific infiltration positions. Oracle is rightfully upset that Batman doesn't let her coordinate their plans because she has more intel, including building plan documents and locations of enemies. Batman tells Oracle that what he needs from her is radio silence, rightfully angering Oracle more. As Batgirl covertly sneaks through the school grounds, moving into place per Batman's instructions to avoid tipping the bad guys off that Bat people are on school grounds, everybody hears gunshots inside the school. Thoughts for Batgirl issue 55. Joshy's thoughts. I hope I'm not the only one who draws parallels between this issue and Tim Drake Robin 2022 run, issue 10. Laughing Seal's thoughts. The artist did a great job making Batgirl emote with the face mask that she has. Shame it feels like the same sulky expression in every panel. Also, after how much went down in the last 3 issues, this issue felt like a nothing burger beyond, yep, the Bat fam are out and about and heard the school was attacked, and that's your lot. Ammo Glitter's thoughts. Ammo liked that there was multiple pages in this issue without dialogue. The action scenes were more effective as a result. It was heartening to see Batgirl, Cass, and Bruce all drop whatever they were doing to immediately attend to the situation at Tim's high school. The best Bat family stories, in Ammo's opinions, are the ones where everyone has each other's back, rather than stories where they are bickering or infighting. 1940s Batman, issue 631. War Games, Act 1, Part 8 of 8. Last Stand at Alamo High, with Kinswan as pencilist, Aaron Soud as inker, and Tony Avino as colorist. Tim has managed to get several students and staff to safety in the nurse's office, and is relieved when Batman, Batgirl, and Nightwing arrive via the sewers. When Nightwing rendezvous with Tim, Tim provides crucial intel on gang numbers and which gangs are located where, which Batman knew Tim would have, because you don't stop being a protege of Batman's ever after you've been fully trained by him. As close as Batman gets to a proud dad moment. The Batfam members present in costume clear the gunman out. Tim also relays there's a girl who's in critical condition, and Nightwing confirms for Tim that Dollar is why the mobsters are there. Though after Nightwing finds Tim relaying the name of the mobster's daughter, Darla, to be a superfluous detail, Tim does not tell them that the mortally wounded student and mobster's daughter are in fact one and the same. After learning of Darla Aquista's critical condition, Batman carries her unconscious body from the school while the media swarm over the image, some claiming that he has killed her, while others claim he and his allies made the situation worse, thus hastening her end, a complete fabrication of events built off zero journalistic evidence. Perhaps a shocking moment in 2004, but feels pretty cynically par for the course in 2026. This comic purports to be the first time footage has been captured of Batman so directly by the media, although Batman has been on many teams, including Justice League ones, as he has over the years. I would severely question how accurate that really is, even in 2004. Some community thoughts on Batman issue 631. Laughing Seal's thoughts. A surgery area in high school? Tim, why are you running so close and talking so openly to Batman in front of everyone? Also, worst journalist ever. One indisputable fact. My guy, you made an assumption. You haven't interviewed a single witness to understand what happened. Josh's counter there. The journalist is giving peak conservative journalistic energy there. Just shows what stands for journalism these days has in fact been a thing since the early 2000s, where shock entertainment beats actual researched reporting. Also, that was the nurse's office. As far as I can tell, there wasn't a single scalpel in sight, so not a surgery area. That school nurse just did the best to stem the blood flow before Batman could extract the body, which he should have done on the gurney to minimize blood loss, but I can understand that making too much noise if there's any remaining gun people in the building. So it could have been a bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Ammo Glitter's thoughts. To satisfyingly pay off the massively high school showdown that has been set up in the previous issues was a massive task, and the issue mostly succeeds, delivering plenty of scenes of bad guys with guns getting beat up in creative ways. Ammo's biggest complaint with this issue, though, was probably the character arc of the news reporter guy, Arturo. He seems to turn on Batman without much of a reason. Sure, there's been one civilian casualty, but the Bat family has also been saving a bunch of people's lives. That's a pretty good, considering Tim tells us there's no less than 6 armed gangs, all in this one school. Josh's counter here is, I view the reporter guy as not believing what he's saying, he's just seeing an opportunity to build a career on bad-mouthing Batman. And in comics, that can work. Look at Marvel's J. Jonah Jameson, who did that with Spider-Man's name for decades. 1937's Detective Comics, issue 798. War Games, Act 2, Part 1 of 8, Undertow. Written by Anderson Gabriche, penciled by Pete Woods, inked by Cam Smith, and colored by Jason Wright. Darla Acquista dies from her injuries, and her father, mob leader Henry Acquista, decides payback is the only response for the gangs responsible for her death. The media have a field day with this Batman school shooting, encouraging concerned Gotham citizens to gather at City Hall for answers from the authorities about measures to stop the violence. Oracle, monitoring the situation, notices Tim Drake among the crowd. Tim feels guilty for being inactive when he could be helping Batman to control the situation. While Oracle provides Batman with a situational update, Oracle also tells him that she feels overwhelmed by the workload and wishes she could be more active in the field. We learn that her Birds of Prey team, Black Canary and Huntress, are on a distant mission. Oracle asks if Batman wants to reconsider keeping Stephanie out of the field, given they need more field agents. Batman doesn't want Stephanie put in danger. Oracle reminds Batman they are still going to need more field agents, and Batman goes to meet Commissioner Akins. Akins, a Greg Rucka creation, first appeared in 2001, made 68 appearances in the 5 years that followed, then disappeared in 2006 following an event called 1 Year Later. The character repops up in a minor role as the mayor of Gotham in 2018, 2 universe reboots later. Batman wants control of the entire police department for 8 hours in order to get Gotham's mob war under control, but Akins refuses, not trusting Batman after the events at the high school, since Batman hasn't countered any of the media misreporting. Additionally, letting a non-trained person lead the police goes against Akins' moral code. On the streets, the violence keeps uprising, and Renee Montoya is injured in the shoulder by a goon's dagger, but she gives as good as she gets and takes out the ringleader of the trio being pursued. Meanwhile, at Leslie's medical clinic, police officers gatecrash to apprehend some of the criminals under Leslie's care. So, as previously mentioned, Batman had a mole at the original meeting that kicked off Batman Wargames. This was a character called Orpheus, created in 2001 with special training and a stealth circuitry enhanced costume, who wanted to be a force against evil and ignorance, and thought Gotham could use a black superhero. The character never took off, and this Wargames event is the last time the character is ever seen, comic history forgetting that he ever existed. More interesting is Orpheus's bodyguard, Onyx, a character that first appeared in 1985's Detective Comics issue 546, who does have staying power as a tertiary character in various DC books, though can sometimes disappear for years between comic appearances. Onyx, always seen with a closely shaved head, is a former member of the League of Assassins, a well-trained hand-to-hand combatant, an ally of Green Arrow and Wonder Woman, and has been a field agent for Batman. Following the 2016 DC Universe reboot, Onyx Adams has aided Catwoman and Green Arrow, and was most recently a rotating member of Kelly Thompson's Birds of Prey run, a character that is always intriguing when they show up and is a combo of mysterious with step-on-me energy. Onyx, who has been patched up at Dr. Tompkins' medical clinic, escapes just in time to avoid the police. Meanwhile, a mobster who only exists for the duration of this Wargames Bat book event, called Alexandra Kosov, meets with a mysterious person, dun dun dun, who has killed her bodyguards and offers her protection from the backlash that is about to come from everybody in Gotham against her and her gang. Soon after, Batman arrives at Alexandra's abandoned apartment during a hit by another gang. After the gang has been defeated, Batman learns that the hit was ordered by Henry Acquista, and Batman reports the events to Oracle. Tim Drake, after spending the issue conflicted over following his dad's wish, while Gotham gets progressively worse, arrives at Batman Manor, his mind made up. Alfred is glad to see Tim, but also sad. Tim has decided to stop living a normal, inverted commas, life. Tim dons his old Robin outfit, mentally asking his father Jack's forgiveness for breaking his promise, while Tim knows he's made the correct decision. General audience thoughts on Detective Comics issue 798. Joshy's thoughts. This is very much an issue that is checking in on all the many rotating parts of the event, closing off old plot lines like Darla, providing updates on plot points that will be needed for the remainder of the event, like whether Batman wants Stephanie in the field, and then sets up new status quos like Tim being Robin again. I feel the issue does a competent job at all of these, with the understanding that other issues are meant to dive deeper into a lot of these story elements elsewhere. Laughing Seal's thoughts. Another nothing burger of an issue. Really felt like not much happened, although absolutely wild that Bruce thought for even a moment he'd have control over the police, or that would be a solution. Absolutely wild. Josh's counter there is, my main reason for including this was 1, confirmation that Darla dies from her injuries, and 2, this issue is also important for touching in on almost everybody in the Bat fam by this point in the event, especially Tim and Steph. Ammo Glitter's thoughts. How dumb is Batman that he seriously thinks the police chief is gonna give him control of the entire police force? It was nice to see Tim to put the Robin suit back on, but Ammo also thought that former superhero tries to adjust civilian life was an interesting angle that more writers should explore. Disclaimer, Ammo has been playing Dispatch and is definitely biased towards that type of story at the moment. I will say Batman taking charge of the police force is something that I, Joshy, could conceivably see happening in the comics if the police force were run by Gordon, and Batman having an ego and considering himself too big to fail. In the Adam West TV series, Batman and Robin were actually officially deputized members of the law enforcement in that particular series. For some additional context, in Act 2, Parts 2 and 3 of Batman Wargames, Tim in Robin attire meets up with Batman. Batman, ever the great communicator, doesn't outwardly display any happiness to seeing Tim as Robin again. Batman goes undercover as Matches Malone to get gang intel. We also have a meeting between Catwoman and Stephanie Brown in spoiler attire. Catwoman reveals to spoiler that Matches Malone and Batman are one and the same. Spoiler tells Catwoman that the burning Gotham City, embroiled in the crime war, is all her fault. Catwoman tries to pull Spoiler out of the field to safety, promising not to tell Batman that Spoiler messed up. Catwoman does tell Leslie Tompkins, though. As a side note, The Legends of the Dark Knight, issue 183, shown on this slide, showcases Javier Rodriguez's beautiful work as a colorist, who was most recently working on Mariko Tamaki's Zatanna Bring Down the House miniseries and Absolute Martian Manhunter. 2000's Batman Gotham Knights, issue 57. War Games, Act 2, Part 4 of 8. The Light at the End of the Tunnel. Written by A.J. Lieberman, penciled by A.L. Barrianevo, and inked by Francis Portela. Gotham City experiences a blackout. Batman sends one of his field assets, Tarantula, to get Penguin to stand down, taking down Penguin's hired gun, Deadshot, yes, of Suicide Squad fame, in the process. Batman realizes he has predicted almost everything that has happened before he planned it all, confirmed after checking a file on the Batcomputer. It is known fact that Batman tends to strategize and plan for all contingencies. I'm sure you've heard of Batman in the past, having worked up plans for how to take down all his colleagues on the Justice League, should he ever need to do so. It makes sense that Batman would run a lot of wargame scenarios to have contingencies in place for any number of hypothetical scenarios that might occur between the various supervillain and gangs found across Gotham City too. Batman also learns Stephanie Brown was the last one to access the file, around the time when she was fired as Robin. Batman contacts the Bat family and tells them this gang war is the result of one of his contingency plans gone wrong. He explains that the plan was supposed to get all the criminal gangs in Gotham under their control by making Orpheus the leader, with Matches Malone's attendance at the initial meetup of the gangs being the linchpin of this plan, able to say the right things to keep paranoia from flaring, able to whip votes for Orpheus to be elected leader, and able to spout reasonings for the benefits of the different Gotham gangs uniting. Spoiler realizes that if Batman and Matches Malone are the same person, this is why Batman's wargame plan went wrong from the start, why Matches never showed up. Referring back to the plan, Spoiler realizes that the key to getting the plan somewhat back on the rails and ending the gang war is to find Orpheus. Batman similarly tells the Bat family that the only way to get the whole situation under control is to find Orpheus and keep him alive. Spoiler reaches Orpheus's building first, as she tells Orpheus that he is a key player in Batman's wargame plan to end this gang war. A mysterious attacker grabs him from behind and slits Orpheus's throat open in front of Spoiler, after which the attacker asks Stephanie to elaborate about this plan that she mentioned. Batman Gotham Knights issue 57, general audience thoughts. I already answered Laughing Seal's questions about who Orpheus is, and Ammo Glitter's thoughts were that this was a hard issue to follow. Ammo felt a bit lost reading this one. RIP Orpheus, though, whoever you are. 1993's ongoing Robin series, issue 130. War Games, Act 2, Part 5 of 8. The Only Light in Gotham. The issue was penciled by John Proctor and Robert Campanella, with Rodney Ramos inking and Guy Major as colorist. Black Mask murdered Orpheus. Black Mask is a creation of Doug Mensch, a name you'll recall from the Moon Knight comic cast. In 1985, a ruthless crime lord called Roman Sionis. He's been shown in shadow in a couple of the previous issues, including making that offer to the Russian mob boss, but this was Black Mask's big reveal in War Games. Gotham events are built on new characters popping up in the second half randomly that aren't in the first half, because in a giant city, you will just have opportunistic villains seeing something happening 2 streets over and going, I can exploit this for my benefit. Spoiler and Black Mask have an extensive back and forth fight. Spoiler getting stabbed in her right shoulder with a giant shard of glass, then being choked into unconsciousness. Black Mask decides to keep Spoiler alive in case she proves useful to him. Black Mask takes a demasked Spoiler to his hideout, chaining her to the wall. Stephanie mostly resists the extensive torture Black Mask applies to her, only revealing that the undercover man working for Batman in the gangs was Orpheus, and that the whole plan is destroyed now that he's been murdered. However, Black Mask has a plan in mind that would make Orpheus still useful for him. Meanwhile, after Robin stops some sexist street thugs and confirms with Oracle that things are quiet on the street, calls Jack Drake, arranging a meeting on their home's rooftop. Jack learns on the rooftop that Tim has returned to being Robin, Tim explaining the current situation needs Tim suiting up as Robin. This was Tim's decision because of values that his father, Jack, passed on to Tim, reassuring Jack that Tim breaking this promise was not an easy one, asking Jack to think what he would do if he could stand in a situation where not doing what is needed would result in a greater number of innocent deaths. Jack is concerned that his only child will die, and Tim reassures Jack that he's careful, not reckless, and doesn't charge into situations blindly. Jack finally agrees, trying to convince Tim to take Jack on his missions. Tim quickly pointing out that Jack has no training and would only be a liability for Jack and for Tim in the field. Tim has Jack Drake and Dana Winters go to the East End Clinic, introducing them to Leslie Tompkins, the clinic's head doctor. The three newcomers to the clinic all donate blood. Then Jack and Dana offer all the assistance they can to the clinic, Dana being slightly more useful with a background as a physical therapist. Tim is forced to leave because of his Robin obligations, Jack coming up with a cover story to tell Dana. General audience thoughts on Robin issue 130. Joshy's thoughts. I like the opening fight between Spoiler and Black Mask because it is a balanced fight where they both get licks in. It's merely Black Mask's extremely high tolerance and threshold for pain, which is the linchpin for the fight going in Black Mask's favor. I'm less a fan of all subsequent scenes with Spoiler chained up. It starts to feel a little torture porn-esque, though there is a really cool panel that's done through Black Mask's teeth. As for the Tim and Jack Drake stuff, I loved everything, both on the rooftop and at the clinic. Every point that Jack has comes from a place of concern as a loving father, and every rebuttal from Tim is measured and well thought through because these arguments have been running through his head back and forth for months. Tim pointing out that it's Jack's influence, not Bruce's, that defines Tim's moral center is such a moving idea, one that not only strikes at the core of Tim Drake, but also strikes at the core of Jack Drake, whether it's been fully shown on panel and comics the reader has consumed or not. Laughing Seal's thoughts. By now, Laughing Seal feels like we're just bouncing around missing crucial info for the main plotline with the chosen issues. All Tim has is his after-school special storyline in the background. It feels super obvious that we've skipped forward because the sense of continuity with the previous issues prior to Robin 130 feels broken. This feels weird. Ammo Glitter's thoughts. The extended scenes of Black Mask torturing Stephanie were not fun for Ammo to read, but it was nice to see Tim and his dad begin to repair their relationship. The 1993 ongoing Robin series, issue 131, War Games, Act 3, Part 4 of 8. Too many ghosts. Batman has learnt Orpheus is dead after Black Mask foils Batman's attempt to end the gang war by impersonating Orpheus. Batman continues being rude to Barbara Gordon's Oracle, who frankly has been the MVP holding the Bat family together, while Batman's been floundering this whole event. Batman asks Oracle about Robin, and she tells him that Tim is doing fine, but probably overcompensating after losing his friend Darla at the school shooting. Batman is dismissive of her educated opinion and reckons Tim is fine. Escaping from Batman in the chaos, Black Mask has returned to Spoiler's torture spot. Spoiler escapes her restraints, and Black Mask and Spoiler have another showdown. While Spoiler momentarily wins in a physical fight this time, she can't bring herself to shoot Black Mask, both because of all Batman's teachings, but also the light inside of her as a person, even after all the torture, and Black Mask disarms and shoots her instead. Black Mask whispers to Spoiler to give Batman Black Mask's thanks for sending a weak, poorly trained child against him, and leaves Stephanie's unconscious and bleeding out body in the basement. Elsewhere in Gotham, Tim Drake as Robin takes down a mercenary group comprised of vicious and pistolera called the Ravens. No connection to Teen Titans Ravens. The Ravens, primarily Birds of Prey antagonists, were started by former Ravens member and lover of Roy Harper, Jade Nguyen, aka Shasha, in the late 90s, a character recognizable for anybody who watched the Young Justice animated series of the early 2010s. Robin takes out the Trickster, a longtime member of the Flash's Rogue Gallery, and Mr. Fun, a former henchman for the ventriloquist and Scarecrow who struck out on his own. For anybody who read past the assigned reading in the 2022 Batgirls series we did for Comic Club, the character also pops up in the second of 3 trade paperbacks collecting that run. Robin snaps at Oracle, not dissimilar to Batman, and Oracle tells Robin to take a break and stop overworking himself. Unlike Batman, Robin is self-aware enough to know he should call back and apologize. Taking Oracle's advice, Tim goes to Leslie's clinic and meets Jack on the building rooftop. Jack's got a bandage on his head from a run-in with some gang kids from a scrounging for supplies run that Jack had gone on to restock the clinic's drug supplies. Roles reversed for half a moment. Tim gets to be concerned and tells Jack to be careful out there. Jack hates that Tim is out there endangering himself, but is also very proud, and you can see the parallels between the two characters in what they stand for and what they consider important. Jack is called back inside the building, Robin also needing to return to the field. In the final panel, even though unspoken, both Tim Drake and Jack Drake know their love for each other as father and son is strong enough to endure anything. General audience thoughts on Robin, issue 131. Joshy's thoughts. I really love that rooftop scene between Jack and Tim. The two of them are talking way more direct to one another than most fathers and sons ever were about their emotions in the early to mid 2000s media. It's touching on larger universal concepts like unconditional love and respect, regardless of whether one believes that those concepts exist. I think most people at least hope that they do. And to see that on display here is so heartwarming and aspirational in some ways. Amoglitter's thoughts. Poor Stephanie, she can just not catch a break. Black Mask being the ultimate bad guy of this wargame storyline also seems a bit out of nowhere, unless they were set up in an earlier issue that we skipped over in this selected reading order, to which Josh responds no. Ammo did think it was fun to see Tim and his dad have the whole "with great power comes great responsibility" conversation, though. That trope never gets old. Little did Ammo know just how right he would be about that comparison. 1940s Batman series, issue 633. War Games, Act 3, Part 8 of 8. No going back. Batman finding Stephanie has gotten her to Leslie Tompkins' clinic, though her condition is critical. Commissioner Akins, sick of Batman's overreach, has ordered that all superheroes be shot on sight if seen interfering in police operations to reduce gang operations. Deadly force allowed to apprehend the vigilantes, dead or alive. As a result of this, Nightwing is out of action from a prior encounter, shot through the leg, and is kept from returning to the field under threat by Alfred, threatening to kneecap the other leg if Nightwing doesn't allow recovery time. Black Mask has been fed Oracle's location in the Gotham Clock Tower, believing it's the Batcave by a character called Hush, who we won't discuss for the sake of time. Black Mask kidnaps a reporter and camera person that are working on the street and hijacks their live broadcast while raiding the Gotham City Clock Tower with Scarecrow, whom Black Mask picks up and feeds to a room full of lasers. Barbara, while held hostage on camera, remains tight-lipped about all Bat secrets and is generally defiant. The reporter escapes and the cameraman is fatally shot through the head. Batman assembles the remaining uninjured extended Bat family members, Robin, Onyx, Batgirl, and Catwoman, and the addition of Tarantula on a neighboring rooftop to the clock tower. Batman gives them instructions to let the police, who've established a perimeter around the clock tower, to take care of all the regular criminals, and that the Bat family should focus on taking down any metahumans or supercriminals that rock up. Meanwhile, Batman takes a secret route into the Gotham Clock Tower. Batman sets a massive explosion that knocks out Black Mask's goons, quickly followed by Batman crashing through the wall at the top of the clock tower. Batman and Black Mask engage in a grueling fight. Barbara tries talking sense to Batman, but is once again ignored. Lovely how they treat female characters in early 2000s comics. Not. Scarecrow, regaining consciousness, exits the buildings, and remembering the pain and agony that Black Mask puts him through, triggers a transformation into the Scare Beast. Just a thing Scarecrow can do in this era of comics, thanks to some body experimentation he's been through. Usually Scarecrow's power set is more fear-based and gas-like, from a gas gun. The police are ineffectual at stopping Scare Beast, hurting themselves more. Batgirl, Onyx, Tarantula, and Catwoman attack the Scare Beast. Simultaneously, Tim as Robin dissuades the police from shooting the vigilantes, explaining to the police commander in charge of the scene that the Bat family are the only people capable of dealing with the monster, and that the commander should order his officers to retreat, allowing the Bat family to do what they're good at. Robin promises that after they defeat Scare Beast, the Bat family will surrender and turn themselves in. To keep Batman from crossing the line and killing Black Mask, Barbara activates a destruction sequence detonating bombs throughout the clock tower structure. A heartbreaking move, as this is Barbara's base of operations at home. This is where she rebuilt her life as Oracle after having her life forever changed when she lost the use of her legs and could no longer be Batgirl. Barbara begs Batman through tears of desperation that if Batman doesn't save Barbara, she will die. She has no way out in her wheelchair unless he stops fighting. The room aflame, the Batman drops Black Mask and rescues Barbara before a final explosion collapses the clock tower. With the fire extinguished, the heroes tap out, Robin telling the police that he lied about the Bat family ever turning themselves in. Maybe they should pitch into rescue efforts instead of being gun-happy rule enforcers. Approached by a reporter at an ambulance, Barbara pretends that she doesn't remember how a rescue happened, and that she is very confused as to why Black Mask believed her tech company could be the secret headquarters of Batman, who she also considers to be a very bizarre creature. Black Mask has disappeared in the chaos. Batman is contacted in staticky communication by Dr. Leslie Tompkins about Stephanie, and from what he can make out, it doesn't sound good. Seeing Robin assisting the firefighters in the rescue efforts, full of light and life and purpose again, Batman heads to the clinic alone as Stephanie nears the end of her life to give Tim a few more hours as a child before that light gets extinguished by sadness. Stephanie, heavily injured, struggles to talk, and when she does, she blames herself for starting the gang war, and she wants to know if Tim hates her, and she speaks about the baby she had a few years ago. Batman tells Stephanie that Tim adores her, and that Batman would make sure her baby will be okay in life. Finally, Stephanie asks Batman if she was actually Robin, or was the experience a trick or lesson by Batman? After Batman confirms that she was really Robin, Stephanie feels glad for being part of the legend of Batman and Robin, even if it was short-lived. Nobody can take that away, no matter what. Stephanie closes her eyes, tears streaming from her eyes, and her heartbeat flatlines on the monitor. Batman watching on. As Batman leaves the clinic, he tells Leslie that the Bat family will always be present in every war Gotham faces. Leslie doesn't speak a word and stares at the Batmobile as it goes away with guilt in her eyes. 2 days later, the remaining leaders of the gangs and mob bosses of Gotham bow before Black Mask, the uncontested ruler of Gotham's entire underworld. General audience thoughts on Batman issue 633. Laughing Seal's thoughts. Again, with the continuity being absolutely bodied. What do you mean Black Mask is suddenly in the bell tower? What? Oh, and the camera crew is here? Seriously, what is going on anymore? Again, just the nature of I can't make people read 30 issues, so picking and choosing the character-centric ones did mean that admittedly the Wargame storyline would have suffered just a little bit. Ammo Glitter's thoughts. This is a satisfying enough conclusion. It's certainly action-packed, to say the least. Ammo is not a fan of big crossover comic book events that don't have lasting consequences, but thankfully Wargames avoids this. Stephanie loses her life, Barbara loses her tech company's building, aka her base of operations, Batman's public reputation is ruined, and Black Mask gains control of all the Gotham crime gangs. The real test is in how long this new status quo sticks around after the event is over. Does it take long for Stephanie to get resurrected? To which the answer is, I believe Stephanie doesn't get resurrected until 2008. Identity Crisis Issue 5, just the Tim Drake and Jack Drake story. Written by Brad Meltzer, penciled by Rag Morales, inked by Michael Baer, and colored by Alex Sinclair. This issue was published a week prior to Batman issue 633, that was obviously continuity-wise set after that issue. In Gotham City, Robin disagrees with his father, Jack Drake. Although Jack wants him to stay indoors, Tim thinks he would be best going out to help his friends until the latest crisis is over. They've been spending a lot of quality time together lately, but the only way to stop this is to go out there and catch whoever is responsible. But he wants his dad to make sure that he doesn't open the doors under any circumstances, because he's a target just like everyone else. After his son leaves, Jack Drake goes into his kitchen and finds a package containing a note showing that a mysterious killer also knows his identity. There is a gun included with a message telling him to protect himself. This is later revealed to be left by the estranged wife of the Ray Palmer version of The Atom. She's called Jean Loring, who orchestrated the events of Identity Crisis, thinking if super families were in danger, it would scare Ray back into her life. The details of the note and gun being left for Jack are not included in the police's later statement to the public, and serve as the details that are Jean Loring's undoing. Realizing his life is in danger, Jack Drake calls Oracle to get his son on the phone. Just then, OG Captain Boomerang, George Harkness, busts in, having been hired through Calculator to make a hit on Drake. Batman and Robin speed back in the Batmobile, and Bruce is desperate not to let another Robin be made an orphan. Jack tells Tim that he loves him, that he's incredibly proud of him, that it's not his fault, and that everything he does is worth it. At the same time, Owen receives a phone message from his dad explaining the job he's taken, and Mercer realizes that he's going to lose his father as well. In Drake Manor, the two men face off. Jack Drake dives out and guns Captain Boomerang down, but is caught by a razor-tipped boomerang in the chest as the villain goes down. Both men lie there dying. 2 new orphans created. Some additional trivia. Robin issue 131 was the last time Jack Drake was seen alive in the pages of the Robin comic. Robin issue 132 starts with Stephanie's funeral and mentioning Jack Drake's funeral in passing, so quite the double-take moment if you were only reading the solo Robin series at the time. Owen Mercer would take up the mantle of Captain Boomerang until 2009's Blackest Night event, when George would be resurrected and Owen killed. The New 52 DC Universe reboot in 2011 retconned Jack Drake to be alive, as well as his first wife and Tim's mother, Janet. Tim Drake as a character was completely different, though, only being the same character in name and hair color, otherwise sharing none of the same personality traits as Tim Drake we've read about and adore. The DC Rebirth universe, reboot in 2016, retconned the New 52 history, with Jack Drake's death in Identity Crisis made canon again, and Tim's personality resembling his pre-2011 characterization again. The Calculator, who I mentioned before, a creation from 1976, is a frequent enemy of the Atom, has been adapted into various media outside comics. He's been voiced by Armin Shimmerman of Star Trek Deep Space Nine Quark and Buffy the Vampire Slayer fame in Batman the Brave and the Bold. And in the CW Arrowverse was the father of Felicity Smoke, romantic partner of that universe's Green Arrow. Infinite Crisis Issue 6 Summary. Then, 6 months later, in Infinite Crisis Issue 6, Tim Drake's best friend, the Connor Kent Superboy, saves Nightwing from an alternate timeline Superboy called Superboy Prime, dying in the process of stopping Superboy Prime and keeping the multiverse from imploding. While this was 6 months in real world time, this would have been at most weeks in comic time. The entire DC universe would time jump forward 12 months soon after. On the other side of the time jump, a statue had been erected for Connor Kent. Tim Drake had modified the colors of his costume to be yellow, red, and black, same as Connor's t-shirt honoring his friend's memory. He and the Cassie Sandsmark Wonder Girl, who had been dating Connor when Connor had died, bonded over the trauma of losing somebody close to them and started dating, although the relationship fizzled quite quickly. 1940s Batman, issue 634, War Games Epilogue Decompression Summary. Batman retells recent events to Nightwing and Alfred, justifying not having told Tim in the aftermath of Oracle's clock tower collapsing, because there'd been enough devastation in that moment and he didn't want to heap more on the shoulders of a boy who he saw as eager, young, and strong in that moment. Robin, fresh from checking in with his dad, who at that point is still alive, and Tim believing Stephanie is still alive, just injured at Eastside Clinic, tries to sneak inside to see her. Bruce intercepts Tim and fills him in on how Stephanie started the gang war to garner Batman's favor. She fought against Black Mask to correct a mistake, and how she died. The issue never touches on the bad judgment call Bruce made to never tell and give Tim the opportunity to say goodbye to Stephanie while she was still alive, and as a result, Tim just numbly listens to Batman filling him in. Days later, Crystal Brown asks Bruce Wayne why he's visiting Stephanie's gravesite. Bruce tells her he's visiting the grave of a young hero, but Mrs. Brown could barely stand hearing the word. She expressed her feelings about the whole situation, her worries of raising a child with a criminal father and watching her instead grow to try and emulate Batman and be like him. Mrs. Brown recalls that Stephanie always pushed hard, trying to fight the good fight, and in the end, all that Crystal Brown has left is a dead husband, a dead daughter, and a grandchild she will never see. Crystal Brown considers Batman a criminal because he breaks the law and drags little girls into his war, getting them killed. Crystal cries, admitting that she feels like she failed Stephanie. Bruce admits to Nightwing and Alfred that, similar to Crystal, Bruce feels he failed Stephanie too. General audience discussion of Tim Drake's trauma from 2004 through 2006. Josh's thoughts. I'm covering this at a very interesting time in Tim Drake's comic history because in the recently released 2025 Batman series by Matt Fraction, Tim Drake has of his own accord stepped away from the role of Robin and superheroing in general. The reason in that series is an editorial mistake causing a continuity error, but I digress. The journey, as I've said multiple times tonight, is about how massively this event impacts Tim and Stephanie. It's also the most cohesive of all the Batman cross-book events that has ever spanned every book in the Bat title ever. On the one hand, I hate what this arc does to Stephanie. I would have loved her to spend a full 50 issues as Robin. Instead, she remains dead for 2.5 years before her death is retconned in 2008, revealing that Leslie fakes Stephanie's death, both to protect Stephanie from Black Mask seeking retribution and to teach Batman a lesson. In 2009, Stephanie becomes Batgirl. What I love is the idea of Tim stepping away from being Robin. I find the journey he goes on with Jack fascinating till they reach a place of acceptance and reconciliation, but I wish that had been explored more. Instead, we have, in the space of 6 months, Tim lose a classmate that he feels responsible for not saving, his girlfriend Stephanie, his dad Jack, and his best friend Connor, and it's the unnecessary heaping of trauma onto a character that didn't need that kind of trauma dump. But these are quintessential events for Tim's life. Laughing Seal's overall thoughts. They didn't particularly like or engage with it. the War Games plotline. They personally felt it was cliche and bare bones. It felt very after school special about making one's family okay with you being a superhero. It doesn't feel like it does anything interesting with that trope. Meanwhile, Laughing Seal felt like the War Games plotline was shot in the foot and had its kneecap broken by jumping past several issues as was needed for fitting the comic club format. They had little idea what was going on by the end, including who Orpheus was, which was answered in this comic club, what were Batman's war games, and what does Stephanie have to do with them, which I have obviously filled you guys in. What is Black Mask doing there? Again, filled in. How did the clock tower get exposed? Again, filled in. And what happened in between Orpheus getting shot and Black Mask attacking Steph? It may have been picking up from it, but the room looked completely different, and I didn't see Orpheus's body, so I assume it wasn't. And that could be just a discontinuity error in the artwork between different titles. Even if we were to ignore all of that, this interpretation of the Bat family really might be one of Laughing Seal's least favorite. Why is Batman thinking he can control the police if this is just an inherently awful idea that is bound to lead to chaos? Why is everyone in Tim's life so terrible towards him when he is racked with guilt? Stuff like that, as well as the fact that Seal found none of the artwork that inspiring, means that Seal doesn't think that they'd want to read the other issues of War Games anyway. Ammo really struggled to find much to like about this War Game story. Stephanie is treated so abysmally, she becomes Robin and then gets fired almost immediately afterwards, and then she is tortured and killed by Black Mask. Batman also acts so recklessly, he demands to have control over the police force and almost lets Barbara die in that concluding issue. Tim and his father's plotline is really the only saving grace, aside from the fact that Jack Drake gets his parenting advice from the worst pamphlet in the world, and then shows up at Wayne Manor with a gun, not winning any Father of the Year awards there. It's also nice to see the extended Bat family working together as a team. For those that did enjoy this, then you will love Batman No Man's Land. Even if you didn't love the story of War Games, but loved the idea of the big sprawling crossover of all the Bat-related books, this is the event for you, especially for those that spoke up on the night and said that they prefer the costumed fighting as opposed to the realism that War Games sort of had. This is all of the biggest names that you know as villains coming in and swinging hard for their bit of a secluded Gotham City. As you can tell, there have been a few changes from the last time as to what we will be covering in 2026, with Once in the Future being pushed back to be a 2027 book, and Scarlet Witch filling that space, and then Heartstopper Volume 6, the final volume of that series we will be covering in December, and May's Comic Club will now be a Discord-only discussion one. I may throw up a YouTube recap value, mainly because I already have the YouTube headshot made up for what I wanted that one to be. But it just keeps things nice and simple for me and caps the number of comic clubs that I'm doing a single year. So, for March, we will be covering Green Lantern War Journal, Volume 1 of the trade paperback, titled Contagion, which is reprinting the War Journal backup stories from Green Lantern issues 1 to 3, and Green Lantern War Journal, the 2023 series, issues 1 through 6. And what other comics has Joshy been reading over the break? I started off by reading Wiccan Witch's Road, which I'm really enjoying so far. Fits in nicely with like his mother's sort of storylines, and also follows on from the end of Empire. Although interestingly, it reverses who is badly wounded at the end of that event and doesn't really give an explanation as to why, so I'm not quite sure how that happened. I've also been reading more of Poison Ivy, which we covered for Comic Club last year, which was guest hosted by the wonderful Laughing Seal. So yeah, I'm still thoroughly enjoying that story. I'm especially loving how messy Janet from HR is being with the cavalcade of supervillains that she is sleeping her way through. I've read the first issue of Beauty because of the Disney Plus series that the comic is based upon. I've been enjoying that, and yeah, I wanted to see what the comic was like that it was spinning out of. I've read the first issues of Psylocke Ninja, which will have Psylocke basically in a retro storyline having involvement with the Hand at a time where they are close to resurrecting Elektra, and I'm sure the two of them will be having a face-off very soon, which is very ironic for me given the 90s action figures for Psylocke and Elektra were repaints of one another on the same character mold. Not even any difference in the face. Also read the first issue of the Rogue series, which I'm enjoying so far, mainly getting for the covers, but the story is interesting. Basically, Rogue having old memories that were suppressed by Professor Xavier of her far past, rising back up of when Rogue used to work with the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. So she's going around to those members that are still around to see what on earth actually happened back then. And yeah, just some of them are in a weird place right now, like Mystique currently being wheelchair bound, which is unusual for her. I also Read Superman, uh, the chain, the Chains in Love, which is a Jack Reacher creeper story with him romancing Livewire, which is fun. Also been reading some more of the 8 Brumble Batgirl series. Still loving it. Really good. Interestingly, looks like she might be getting some powers, which is intriguing. Also been reading a bit of the 2006 Wonder Woman series. It was set up with Donna Troy meant to be taking over as Wonder Woman, but apparently she immediately gets sidelined. And then Agent Diana Prince, has to balance her life as a secret agent with also rescuing her captured friends, including the Donna Troy Wonder Woman. And I've also read a bunch of the book Age of Revelation, the most recent X-Men multi-book event, and yeah, it's fine. It's not really what I want for Douglas Ramsey slash Cypher, but some interesting stories in sort of like this alt world that immediately gets closed off pretty cleanly. And I've also read Grimm by Stephanie Phillips. Yeah, fun, great art. Intrigued to see where it goes after having read the first 2 trade paperbacks. And yeah, Stephanie Phillips is set to be the next writer of Daredevil, starting in March 2026. Thank you for listening and watching. The end.